Are we on? All right. Hi. Good evening. And welcome to I Am Deliberate and Afraid of Nothing, Poetry and Protest, a dinner conversation in honor of Audre Lorde and Pat Parker, and in support of the Women's Building. Tonight we have Judy Grahn, Jewelle Gomez, Avotcja, Arisa White, Leila Weefur, and Angela Hume. This event is funded in part by a grant to the Academy of American Poets from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in support of Poetry Coalition programs, and is co-sponsored by the Poetry Center, CADIS, Women and Gender Studies, and sorry, I just got a notification that we're being recorded. Women and Gender Studies, San Francisco State, and the Women's Building. My name is Tatiana Luboviski-Acosta, and I am your MC this evening. We begin by acknowledging that the campus of San Francisco State University is on the land of the Ohlone people. Indigenous people from other tribal nations also reside here in the San Francisco Bay Area. While a mere acknowledgement does nothing to undo hundreds of years of settler colonialist land theft, violence, and genocide, past and ongoing, we do thank the Ohlone people and their ancestors for allowing us to live, work, and fight for liberation on their land. Please consider making a donation to the Women's Building, a women-led nonprofit arts and education community center located in San Francisco and around the corner from my apartment, which advocates self-determination, gender equality, and social justice. Founded in 1979, the Women's Building has been the site for historic Poetry Center events, significantly a landmark 1986 reading by Pat Parker and Audre Lorde, a solo reading by June Jordan in 1993, and a rare Bay Area appearance by Nicaraguense poet-priest Ernesto Cardenal in 2001. And we are pleased to renew our connections and to help bring public support to this vital institution. And in an effort to extend tonight's program from the computer screen to the real world, CADIS, in collaboration with State Fabric Editions and Kennedy Morgan, a Black queer artist based in Oakland, along with Leila Weefur, will publish a limited edition zine comprised of tonight's newly commissioned texts. The edition will take the form of a letter and arrive at your doorstep for free, should you wish to receive it. A special gift to you, all of y'all who are tuned in right now, and go ahead and sign up by the end of the event. And they'll be ready to ship at the end of the month, and you can find a link to a Google form in the chat. So we begin right now with 2 video clips from the Poetry Center recording of Pat Parker and Audre Lorde from a reading at the Women's Building from February 7th, 1986, and they'll be about 3 minutes each. After that, our panelists are going to read for about 5 or so minutes, give and take, and they will be sharing letters that they have been commissioned to write. And then we'll have a conversation between the panelists, and we will open it up for a Q&A. So thank you, and excuse me for being kind of nervous, but I'm very excited to be here with all of you tonight. Thanks.
The next person who asks, "Have you written anything new?" just might get hit, or at least snarled at or cursed out. I got a week's vacation from work, the first in at least 2 years. The first day of my vacation, I cleaned my house, scrubbed walls and floors, prepared it and me to write. The second day of my vacation, I bought 2 reams of paper, a new ribbon for my typewriter, groceries to last the week. The third day of vacation, the dog comes home from his nocturnal run. He doesn't eat, his nose is dry, off to the vet. Parvovirus, he'll die, no doubt. But I doubt. Been my dog for 12 years and I'm not ready for him to die. So antibiotics and broth every 2 hours and maybe he'll live. Pick up the kid, teacher says, she's been quiet today. My kid is many different things at different times. What she's not is quiet. Take the kid home, temperature 104 degrees, call Alicia. What do you do for fever? Aspirin, liquids, no drafts, so the routine begins. Give the dog his medicine, give the kid her medicine. Try and get his stool for the vet, try and get her to stay in bed. 3 days later, the dog is fine, the kid is fine, I'm exhausted, and it's time to go back to work. At work, I start work on the new protocols. I go to a director's meeting, write a speech for a rally on the weekend. Lab work returns, no products of conception. Call the woman, get a sonogram. She's pregnant, but in her stomach. Somebody forgot to turn on the alarm system that we got after being ripped off 4 times. Letter comes from the IRS. I'm being audited for 1978. They want more money. A friend calls. She's broken up with her lover and is afraid to get her clothes. Could I please go with her? She doesn't want to call the police. I decide to go to the bar and drink. Woman decides I'm flirting with the bartender who she's been flirting with all night. Now I'm in a fight. And now I'm in another fight outside the bar, and cop cars are coming from everywhere, and I remember my mother telling me I should be a teacher. And me saying, but I want to write, paint pictures with words, read poems for people. And I get a call from a sister who wants me to come and read for her college, but they only have money for advertising. And I see me giving Marbell a poster from a reading for my January phone bill, which is huge, because I called my friend in New York to say, I think I'm going mad here, because my lover, who isn't my lover, because we haven't defined the relationship as such, thinks we're getting too close, seeing each other 5 days in a row after the fight we had 2 weeks ago because I'd not shown enough caring or commitment. Decides maybe we should be good friends who fuck. At least we do that very well. And why deprive our bodies even if we can't get our heads in sync? And I think maybe the next person who asks, have you written anything new? Just might get hit.
One of the difficult things about reading from manuscript is that the pages fall apart. Well, stations. This started out a subway poem, but it moved into quite something else. And you have subways here now in San Francisco, don't you? Yeah. I see it's as sore a point for you as it is over there. Got it. Well, you really have to check out how much time you spend waiting in them. The title of this poem is Stations. Some women love to wait for life, for a ring in the June night, for a touch of the sun to heal them, for another woman's voice to make them whole, to untie their hands, put words in their mouths, form to their passages, sound to their screams, for some other sleeper to remember their future, their past. Some women wait for their right train in the wrong station. In the alleys of morning, for the noon to holler, the night come down. Some women wait for love to rise up, the child of their promise, to gather from earth what they do not plant, to claim pain for labor, to become the tip of an arrow, to aim at the heart of now, but it never stays. Some women wait for visions that do not return where they were not welcomed naked, for invitations to places they always wanted to visit, to be repeated. Some women wait for themselves around the next corner and call the empty spot peace. But the opposite of living is only not living, and the stars do not care. Some women wait for something to change, and nothing does change, so they change themselves.
I always really love seeing both of those. I'd like to welcome our panelists on to the screen now. So here in Northern California, we have poet, activist, and scholar Judy Grahn, and writer, activist, who's Molly? Oh, hi, Judy. Okay.
Hi there. Hi, Tatiana.
Hi. Hi. I'm going to go ahead and welcome the others. Okay. We also have Jewelle Gomez, writer, activist, author, and former director of the Poetry Center. Is Jewelle? Oh, great. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. All right, and poet and multi-instrumentalist Avotcja. I keep waiting for like a giant reveal, right? Okay, I just got word that she's not here yet. And we have poet Arisa White.
Hi.
Hi. There. Okay. All right. Okay. Steve is here. That's good. Is Arisa here? Okay. I'd also like to welcome Leila Weefur, artist, writer, and curator.
Hello.
Hi. And scholar and poet Angela Hume, who I thought was in Minnesota, but apparently is back here in the Bay Area.
Hi.
Hi. So I guess we're waiting on Jewelle and Narissa, but first up, we're going to have Judy. How do you feel about that?
Are you asking me? Yeah.
Tonight, great. We're going to have Judy, Jewelle, Avotcja, when she gets here, Arisa, Leila, and Angela, and then we'll have a talk, all of us.
Great. That sounds wonderful. I can't wait to hear everybody. And I get to go first, so I get to hear everybody peacefully. This is my letter. Dear everyone, especially those wanting to know how to be bold in scary times. The times for Audre Lorde and Pat Parker were also scary times, and they wrote directly into them, which is what keeps their work so timeless and valuable. From having known and loved them both, I can tell you they were fierce and angry at times, and they were also funny and sensual, tender, protective, and deeply compassionate. Both believed in educating people by revealing truths from their own lived experience and intense passion. I met Pat in 1970. Pat and I met Audre in 1971. Pat and I traveled around together giving readings in the early 70s, and all three of us spent time in each other's houses. As all three of us traveled often to the opposite coast doing our poetry readings. We were poets for common causes, feminist and lesbian, anti-racist, anti-violence, and also part of other movements for liberation. As Pat said in one of her poems, I have placed this body in many movements. Now, you listen. I have a dream too. It's a simple dream, to bring all of herself into the world. We all learned from Pat's direct and often stunning honesty, her decision to use metaphor sparingly, her use of her own life and experience, which placed her in a central position to address some of the most difficult of subjects, not only police murder, but also marital rape, child sexual abuse, femicide, and love, lots of love, and parenting as a lesbian. Hers was often among the first voices for all these subjects. Pat's family wanted her to become a lawyer. Her lawyerly mind shows up in a poetic that is often an exploratory argument leading to a logical conclusion. For instance, two voices arguing about freedom of speech. White students saying, "Speak, let them speak," while Blacks, Jews, and a few whites say, "Don't let the fascists speak." And the poet concludes that the Supreme Court decreed it is illegal to scream fire in a theater, as it causes people to panic and do harm. Pat was a fighter, literally, and fistfights were part of the bar culture that she loved. Hard to exaggerate how brassy and brave she was. For instance, going with a white lover, both dressed for show, on a Sunday morning to a crowded Denny's and sitting in a very visible booth, necking. Over on the East Coast, Audre didn't live in a collective household as we lesbian activists did on the West Coast. She belonged to a close-knit group of lesbians who were writers, teachers, and psychologists, and so she also had sisterly support. Audre was a vivid person. She wore head wraps and for a while, bright dashikis, lots of necklaces and big rings, or in a more butch mood, black leather head to foot. She sorely missed the lushness and vivacity of the Caribbean and often burst into lavish descriptions of the odors and tastes of open markets. She was very generous and caring. Once, in between rushing me to a reading in a blustery rainstorm and showing me her house, explaining the Kwanzaa materials in her dining room, she took me on a tour of my New York, as she called it, driving through a Manhattan that no longer exists, enthusiastically showing me street after street, each of which specialized in only one kind of wear. The street of goldsmiths, the one of fish markets, the clothing districts with rolling racks. I always imagined this was the one part of the US most like Europe, and perhaps most like Mexico and the Caribbean, and parts of Africa, all places she knew and loved. Audre never accepted authority as real or right, including medical authority. After her first bouts with cancer and her mastectomy, she refused to wear a prosthetic breast and called the medical establishment the cancer industry. She sought alternative treatments in both Germany and Mexico and prolonged her own life way beyond her prognosis, using her own intuition for what would work best for her every inch of the way. She revealed a part of her poetic method one morning when she was staying with me and Paula Gunn Allen, and Paula asked her, Audre, how do you do what you do? How do you come up with your new ideas? Audre thought a moment and said, I throw myself at the wall. We all have that wall. It lives inside of us, a resistance that shuts out the unknown. We need the unknown now more than ever. It takes a different but just as strong a kind of courage to break through to attain it. But once through, the other side reveals a new wisdom or a method of survival. These two beautiful and tough poets who never thought of themselves as victims directly address the issues of their times, which remain the issues of our times. Again and yet again, they threw themselves at the wall, and so must the rest of us. Love, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Jewelle, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Okay, thank you. This is great to be with all of you all. I really am excited to hear the rest as well. This is my letter. Dear future fans and scholars, here's a quote from Audre. At night, sleep locks me in an echoless coffin. Sometimes at noon, I dream there is nothing to fear. That's from her poem, Prologue. When I chose that quote from Audre's poem, little did I know who the woman was behind it. Since then, there is little that has gone undiscovered or underanalyzed about poets and activists of the magnitude of Audre and Pat. But there are a couple of aspects I believe sometimes remain unacknowledged. We know of Audre and Pat's scholarly and political accomplishments, but often we forget their youth and their capacity for fun at the time of these accomplishments. Like most of the folks filling our streets for the Black Lives Matters demonstrations, Pat and Audre were also eager and young and sometimes playful. When they were beginning their important work, Audre and Pat were the age many of you are, their acolytes now. And they experienced anxiety, uncertainty, intimidation, much the same as you and I have. Audre talked about an early experience during the Black arts movement when a magazine editor didn't understand a line in her poem that revealed the love interest was another woman. The editor decided to, quote, clarify her poem, that is to obscure the lesbian intent. That was done in only that one publication. With experience, Audre never let her work be clarified again. I point to their youth as they shaped their work because I believe we weaken our own possibilities to have an impact on our communities if we treat our icons as if they sprang fully formed as heroes like some ancient Greek myth. Audre and Pat each had childhoods and adolescences in which they were concerned about their looks, their weight, their clothes, their friends, their futures, as most young women do. The power in their iconic status is really in their humanity and the human frailties they, like us, managed throughout their lives. I feel fortunate to have gotten close enough to glimmer their humanity and use their perceptions to urge myself onward when things feel overwhelming, like tonight as I sit waiting to hear the last voting results. That period we call the second wave of feminism has been unfairly characterized as grim, doctrinaire, and colorless. I think that leads you to not see activists of that period clearly. The truth is, we could never have accomplished half the things we did without a sense of humor or a sense of our own sensuality. Two stories. In 1984, I interviewed Audre and another activist, Maua Flowers, for the film Before Stonewall at a small cafe in the West Village. The interview went great. They were fun. They knew all of their history and how to talk about it without being boring. And then we were done and the crew was clearing up and we kept talking. The cafe owner kept giving us free wine. So we sat there and we kept talking. And then I noticed that Audre and Maua were trying to outweight each other to see who was going to have dinner with me. It was a time-honored tradition between old bar dykes. Who can outlast who and spend the evening with the girl? It didn't matter that we were all in relationships that would not go any further than dinner. Those two could not help flirting and maneuvering. And over dinner with Audre, I teased about her proficient flirting. A couple of years ago, when I described that scene I was at a huge celebration of Audre in Oakland, and I described that scene. Afterwards, a bunch of young women came up to me and expressed their surprise that Audre Lorde was flirtatious with anyone. I was shocked they couldn't imagine that. But then I realized that they all thought of Audre as if she were a bronze statue. And I wouldn't mind a bronze statue of Audre if it could replace some of the ones of the colonizers up around the Bay Area, but that's another letter. Again, in the 1980s, I similarly got a good sense of the woman that Pat Parker was at a National Black Queer Conference. She recruited several of us to do a performance of her poem, Movement in Black. She got poet Cheryl Clark, essayist and activist Barbara Smith, and me to come into a hurried rehearsal to do Movement in Black, and we would be the backup singers, and Pat would be the lead singer. And we were really apprehensive. We were all from the East Coast. There's a big divide there. And Pat was from the West Coast. And Pat was rumored to be exacting and tough. So Barbara, Cheryl, and I went into this rehearsal, which was going to be complete with steps like the Supremes. And we were so nervous. And it could have been a drag. It could have been a disaster. There was a whole lot of egos in that room. And all of us afraid that we were going to screw up and Pat was going to be furious. But Pat, she started by calling into the room our favorite girl groups, the Shirelles, the Ronettes, Martha and Vandellas. And almost immediately, we all dropped into the rhythm of the music we'd grown up with and the revolutionary spirit of the work. Pat knew that reminding us of our sisterhood was the way to touch us through all of the anxiety we were carrying. We spent a good bit of that rehearsal laughing at stories we told each other about our teen years and those girl groups provided our soundtrack. Pat, very precise with her own work, was proud she'd assembled such a stellar group of Black backups. It was in those brief moments with Audre and Pat where we laughed with and at each other that I learned just how human and just how iconic they are. I recommend all of you always remember their humanity and their humor, and you really know Audre and Pat and their work. When I see the young demonstrators, I always hear the lines of Pat's poem. Movement in black, you can't keep us back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jewelle. Avotcja, are you ready?
I've been ready. I've been here since 6:30.
Let's do it then. Let's go.
I am so honored to be here with some of my heroes. Judy, it's so wonderful to see you, and the same with Jewelle. You know, what can I say? I did not know Audre Lorde. I was friends with Pat, and we had a very strange relationship for a lot of years because by the time we met, I had been clean and sober for a few years, so I was not part of the bar scene. I didn't hang out in bars. The only time you see me in a bar, gay, straight, or any other kind, is if I was playing music or if I was the DJ, which made me weird. I was very weird. And but you know, I really worshiped her poetry and she liked mine and what have you. I was working the Chitlin and Coochie Frito circuit with my music and my poetry. And she knew the lesbian in crowd. She knew that set. And when we finally started working together, I was her opening act for the last three and a half years of her life. She took the Chitlin circuit and the Coochie Frito circuit, but she had folks from the churches and everybody else loving her. And she introduced me to the lesbian set because I didn't know anything except music and poetry. And frankly, wasn't interested in much anything but music. I'm a fanatic. So, but we really loved each other's poetry. Pat was a phenomenon. She was an amazing writer. And one of the things that we liked about each other, that both of us were open as far as our lesbianism was, but that was not the only thing we were open about. We were both Black. We were both seeing the murders and the chaos and the degradation and the humiliation that was going on. And we talked about it really loud. And we both admired that about each other. We also admired each other's sense of humor. Pat was the most unbelievably sarcastic human being on planet Earth. She had, it is a Caribbean thing. It's, you know, it's like we say that we've turned sarcasm into a fine art form. And Pat was definitely a part of that. So we admired that about each other. When we finally started working with each other, it was like, it was made to happen. I mean, I had always loved her work. And what can I say? I guess that's all I can say. What I'd like to do is a poem, one of her poems, and a poem that I wrote for the thing after she passed, because I think that's what I'd like to hear. I think folks, the newcomers who all of a sudden love Pat in retrospect, you don't know what you missed. And I want to say, for Pat's sake and for all of the other brilliant women artists out there, please support us while we're alive. Don't wait until we're died because it then make us your hero. That's not going to help you. Pat was absolutely amazing, absolutely diverse, ingenious. And so I want to read one of her favorite poems, one of her most powerful poems, or let's just say one of my favorite ones of hers, Jonestown. And nobody would touch that. Nobody would touch the issue when it happened. But Pat not only touched it, she... So anyway, if you don't have the book Jonestown and Other Madness, do yourself a favor and get it. As a child in Texas, race education was simple, was subtle, was sharp. The great Lone Star State sharply placed me in colored schools with colored teachers and colored books and colored knowledge. I shopped in white stores and brought colored clothes, keep the colors loud and bright so they dazzle in the night. No matter where a nigga's bred, they love yellow, orange, and red. I used colored toilets and rode on colored buses home, went to colored churches with colored preachers and prayed to a white God, begged forgiveness for Cain, and his sins and his descendants, us lowly colored sinners. And the message was simple, was sharp. There is a place for niggers, but not among good white folk. At home, race education was simple, was subtle, was gleaned by differences. The white man who jumped free fall if in the sky was quietly dismissed. White folks are crazy. The white man who turned somersaults on sports spectacular skis was quietly dismissed. White folks will do anything for money. The white man who shot and killed his wife and children and then himself received a head shake and a sigh and a simple statement, white folks are crazy. And the messages fell into place. White folks went crazy and went to nut houses. Black folks got mad and went to jail. White folks owned America. Black folks built it. As I grew into adulthood, many messages were discarded. Many were forgotten, but one returns to haunt me. Black folks do not commit suicide. Black folks do not commit suicide. November 18, 1978. More than 900 people, most of them black, died in a man-made town called Jonestown. Newscasters' words slap me in my face. People's tears and grief emanate from my set. And I remember the lessons, rehear a childhood message. Black folks do not commit suicide. I thought of my Uncle Dave. He died in prison. Suicide, the authorities say. Boy just up and hung himself. I remember my mother, her disbelief, her grief. Them white folks killed my brother. Dave didn't commit no suicide. And the funeral, a bitter, quiet funeral, his coffin sealed from sighters. And we all knew Dave died not by his hands. Some God decided that nigga should die. And I stare at the newscaster. He struggles to contain himself. It's a big story, and he must not seem too excited. American troops made a grisly discovery today in Jonestown, Guyana. My inner scream as the facts unfold. A communist preacher, and I see old black women. My grandmother's communists, no. Little old black ladies do not believe in communists. They believe in God and Jesus, yet the newscaster's words, a commune, a media storm, words and pictures, interviews with ex-members, survivors, city officials. The San Francisco Chronicle had a problem with its press's erratic delivery of the morning paper. And in 2 days, the Chronicle publishes a book, eyewitness account, by a staff writer who survived the airport attack. And the story grows. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, have I got a tale for you. We got these men, 2 men, a congressman and a preacher, and the supporting cast of hundreds. The congressman went to investigate the preacher and wound up dead. The preacher wound up dead. The supporting cast wound up dead, and all of the dead are singing to me, black folks do not commit suicide. My phone rings. Newscaster mistakenly says, Patricia Parker, not Parks, died on the airstrip. A friend wants to know, are you alive? Yes, I am here. Not there festering in a jungle with a bloated belly, not a victim in a dream deferred, not a piece in a media puzzle, not a member of in the supporting cast. Yet I am there, walking with the souls of black folks crying, screaming, why, black folks? Why are you here and dead? Tell me how you willingly died. Did the minister sing to you, Kool-Aid tastes great? I like Kool-Aid, can't wait. I see black people, beautiful black people, in lines in front of a tub of 20th century hemlock. I see guards with guns. Why guns? And the pictures continue to flow. Images of a man, a church man, he cures disease. No, he's a fake hired people, treated liver. He loves God. No, he's a communist. He talks many messages, revolution to the young, God to the old. He believes in the family. No, he destroys the family, fucks the women, fucks the men, and the media continues to tell the tale of an interview with a live one. You were a member of the People's Temple. Yes, I was. Why did you join? Well, I went there a few times and then I stopped going, but Reverend Jones came by my house and asked me why I quit coming. I was really surprised. No one had ever cared that much about me before. No one had ever cared that much about me before. And it came home. The message of my youth came clear. The black people in Jonestown did not commit suicide. They were murdered. They were murdered in small southern towns. They were murdered in big northern cities. They were murdered at school children, by teachers who didn't care. They were murdered by policemen who didn't care. They were murdered by welfare workers who didn't care, by shopkeepers who didn't care. They were murdered by church people who did not care. They were murdered by politicians who didn't care. They did not die at Jonestown. They went to Jonestown dead, convinced that America and Americans didn't care. They died in the schoolrooms. They died in the streets. They died in the bars. They died in the jails. They died in the churches. They died in the welfare lines. And Jim Jones was not the cause. He was the result of 400 years of not caring. Black folks. I say black folks do not commit suicide. Pat Parker. When Pat passed, there was a big memorial that we did, and I was going to do a poem that Pat liked of mine, and I could feel her spirit the night before say, oh, no, you will not. You're going to write something for me. And I didn't get a chance to go down and get this out of my car, so I am going to go to my computer and read it off of the computer. It's a thing that I wrote for her. We used to do these interviews, and we go, and these people, these liberals would always have the same questions. I mean, what is poetry, and what is a poet, and from whence do you get your inspiration? And I won't say the words that we'd be saying under our breath because you'd knock me off the screen real quick. But so this is what the poem is called. What is a poet? Dedicated to my friend and hero, Pat Parker. A poet will never be allowed the luxury of blindness. A poet is a receiver, an antenna, and a transmitter, all wrapped up in one. A poet sees it all and hears it all and is obligated to tell everything. A poet is at best a storyteller, a griot, a historian, the keeper of the flames. We are walking pincushions who can even feel tomorrow breathing down our backs. We can taste yesterday's laughter and see the tears you've yet to cry. A poet goes to sleep with words dancing all around their head. We're sound junkies who don't know how to be quiet. A poet just can't stop it. We can't turn it off. It's like an avalanche of word, the beauty, the terror, the power of sound. It's all around us. It's everywhere and everything all the time. We don't have to go looking for a poem. Poetry follows us like a shadow. It just keeps on coming and it won't go away. We're driven people. Call it a gift, a healthy obsession. Call it a poem. A poet is everything and nothing, a lover and a liar. Where am I at here? Oh yeah, a gossiper and a gift bringer, and the light at the end of the tunnel. A poet is as new as the morning and older than dirt. And a good poet, just like good poetry, is forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And that was for my dear friend, Pat Parker. I'm so grateful that she walked through my life. And I want to say one more time, you folks, if you really love Pat or Audre or any of the so-called people that you wait for us to die and you start worshiping, please support us while we're alive. Pat Parker should have been a superstar that should have been known all around the world, just like Judy Grahn or Jewel or what have you. They should be household names. So support us while we're living. Thank you. I'll shut my mouth.
Damn, thank you, Avotcja. Thank you. All right. Arisa, are you ready?
I am.
All right.
I'm so excited to be here, honored, just amazed. So I'll begin. I love the care, tenderness, and realness of the sister love letters. The letter from Audre to Pat, dated December 6, 1985, contained a list of bewares, which was advice I also needed. There is one caution Audre Lorde offers Pat that I kept returning to. Beware all the hatred you've stored up inside you and the locks on your tender places. The truth and metaphor of that is so generative. My imagination was fueled by their exchange, and I started to imagine a character named Lord Bell, who facilitates an ecotherapy group called Sister Outsiders, SOSs for short. And there are a total of 12 members. Each one is given personalized nature-based prescriptions in the form of letters to commence their healing ritual. In this excerpt I'll read, I riff off the quote just mentioned, as well as from Audre Lorde's essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury. The narrator has a many generations removed Caribbean accent, and the protagonist's name is Arise. It is set in a place like Oakland, California. And so it begins. Lord Bell sent all 12 SOSs a letter, seamstress for she. Lord called it a trade in reflections. All them sisters share each week the struggles that brought them to the group. And I share with you what got me through, Lord said. For each letter, Lord sits in silence and waits for the humming that has no sound to move she hand. Then the words laid down with a micro tip. So it begins. Even before Arise retrieves the vellum envelope from the mailbox, Lord Bell's purple earth scent, like she whole presence was folded up into a legal size, like she right there and she hand. Her purple earth was Lord's way of bringing you back to breath. Arise inhales, out there on the porch with AC transit letting passengers off. In, a Chinese granny with a shopping cart filled with redeemables. Out, Arise breathes till muscles from she nape to asshole relaxes. Late morning traffic, littler in its rush, moving like stirring curry into coconut milk. A green tinted day, the lake just being a mood stone. Upstairs, Arise removes the tea bag, the tea perfect black and condensed milk, thick, then all sweet and loose once introduced to Earl Grey. She sips and opens. Lavender falls out, falling to chiflor. Dear Arise, my sister. Lord Bell's womanly script, lean and buxom, the uniformity of fish scales, speaks clear in Arise's head. Do as your name says. The lavender around your feet, I'm sure. Though this is not true to the root, lavender echoes levitate. They rhyme like cousins in my ear. My story to you is about ascent, about having hit a negative below, depressive rock bottom. Up is where I needed to find my way. The medicine is right there in your name, noun and action. You're wound so tight, step in like it's punishment. You're here, like gravity is a sentence and not a horizon. Arise. I would plan a plan, project myself in increments of 5, panic that 10 years of life rest in my hands. And for 20 years before me, I needed my feet so no one can sweep me off them. They were my future. The hows polluted my sleep, and every person and encounter a means to get me there, ambitiously there, the best and bestest while there. What was rest? Night? Shit, I don't know. Something other people got to have. And also when I got my brightest light bulbs, galas of eurekas, but each time reality didn't meet my vision, I dropped deeper into not good enough, kept face, but it was beat. Wine, indica, G&Ts, and the Ducci never passed from my hand. I was walking like fist on ground, some hatred I knew and didn't know, stored up inside, feeling riotous, confused why my straight-laced, dutiful goodness didn't get me the money, job, attention, award, prestige, attention, love I'd calculated. I didn't beware and walked into barking doubt, shrunk into a sacred seed of myself. Arise. Here are 13 questions for you. Write each one down on small pieces of paper, then fold. Keep in a jar by your door and take one on a walk around the lake. Listen to the lake answer you. Feel for tender places newly unlocked. What gets freed for you to see? Arise, seated in a royal pose at she desk, noon coming through Venetian slats, takes the black pilot and she write, transcribes the questions on yellow post-its, each one a tiger when she done. Which ideas allow me to pursue my magic? Which fears rule my life and form my silences? Where are my dark spaces within? Each one knocking on a wall. Where are my places of possibility? What are my daring ideas? How do I train myself to respect my feelings? Each one a hot degree to melt. What feels right to me? What are old ideas I've forgotten? What do I feel? Each one agitates she face. What do I dare to make real? Which of my dreams have pointed the way to freedom? Each one begging free. What new possibilities and strengths do I taste? What old ideas do I want to make felt? Each one a strong whiff of she-self. Thank you.
Thank you, Arisa. Leila, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
I too am really, really honored to be here with everyone. And I didn't know Audre or Pat, but in my letter, I am addressing them because I want to believe that my words, this letter, can reach them somewhere in time and space. So I'll begin. To Audre and Pat, I don't imagine either of you cared much about other people's visions of you. I don't doubt the ease of which you are able to escape the imposition of someone else's imagination. Not after first surrendering to the labors of growth. I'm recalling when you wrote to Pat, recalling you writing to her about the synonymous relationship between growth and survival. A poignant and connecting line you drew. And even though neither of you are here, I do believe and maybe hope that the architecture of my language, the skin of my diction, both contain and release the possibility for us to grow past survival, even in death. I know I'm unable to receive your express consent, but I should ask anyway. Can I share with you how I see you? Not as an imposition on our collective memories of you, but as an attempt to extend my fingertips far enough to reach yours. Your fingertips in a world parallel to mine. Once upon a time, I saw you, the both of you, traipsing up and down the lesbian grapevine. Audre, with a straight leg, blue denim pant, a white button-up open just enough to expose that hollow point between the clavicles. And over that, a heavy fall-colored cardigan. The best part though, the black hat with a wide and curved brim. A hat with enough presence to match your personality. And when I saw you, I said to myself, what a handsomely gay Harlem cowboy. How gracefully you inhabited the best of both worlds. Oh, but let's not mistake the real cowboy here. The suit and tie cowboy with a pleated slack and tie and vest. Houston, Texas cowboy Pat. I saw you defending your right to don cowboy boots as they mistakenly forced a goat into the shape of a girl. I bet no one told you goats are magic. Perhaps no one reminded you that someone imposed an image onto that goat, named one goat Billy and the other goat Nanny. Someone lacking just enough in imagination, unable to see Pat comfortably situated in the space between Billy and Nanny. But I saw it. Oakland has cowboys too, still, after you. And I see these cowboys, you, both meeting in parallel time. I imagine the world you grew gay in was focused on tracing shadows rather than filling them in. The lines back then, even for the simplest of silhouettes, had not been clearly defined. But for us, the shadows are more than outlines of figures. They are shaded with nuance, escaping, or at least attempting to escape the heavily drawn outlines surrounding it. I'm in anticipation of a loss that I can't quite fathom until it happens. Something I know I want, but can't quite comprehend. Permanently altering a part of myself that has been there since I was 11 or 12. It's not cancer, but the weight of the loss is present. The loss of a gravity presently tugging at the skin around my heart. Can you tell me what lives on in the absence of the feminine accoutrement? Those rounded, reactive appendages that, once removed, can no longer grow or give or experience pleasure. It was in the cancer journals where you, Audre, said, I want to write of the pain I'm feeling right now, of the lukewarm tears that will not stop coming into my eyes. For what? For my lost breast? For the lost me? And which me was that again anyway? For the death I don't know how to postpone or how to meet elegantly? Well, I want to write of the pain I've yet to feel and of the lukewarm tears that have yet to form for something I've elected to do, for my lost breasts. I want to know what part of the self survives the amputation of a former identity. I imagine my lukewarm tears to form instead for a lost me, for a found me, a death and desire I can no longer postpone, in refusal of the real and the prosthetic. I wonder what would change if you knew that the shapes of your silhouettes could be neither or both, if language had transfigured in enough time to reach you. There's freedom in refusal and in choice. To choose to be a unicorn or a goat, and the choice to feel like the loss of a breast or both doesn't make you less. There's a question that sticks to my rib whenever I read you, whenever I see you. How can someone represent themselves in a simplified word when we come from a world that is bathed in complexity? Can I tell you how I see you? Can I tell you how my mouth rejects the formation of the word she? Because time has folded over, so the pages of history can touch and transfer ink and blur lines to free us from the imposition of language and of choice and of an imagination other than ours. The Black cowboy is free. The goat is free. The Black unicorn is free. Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Hi, Angie.
Hi.
Hi. You ready?
Yeah, it's such an honor to participate in this evening celebrating Audre Lorde and Pat Parker with Judy and Jewelle and Avotcja and Arisa, Leila and Tatiana. Thank you. And I can't wait to move into the conversation part of the program and listen more to amazing poet, artist, activist, elders, and peers on the stage. But first, I try to spend a lot of time listening and learning from both Lorde and Parker, and it's a privilege to share some of what I've been learning about with all of you. Dear community, part of Audre Lorde's and Pat Parker's work as Black feminist critical social theorists was their advocacy for women's and queer health justice. As health educators, they insisted on collaborative knowledge production. Their writings demonstrate how dialogue, talking, sharing, reaching toward, being with, making use, as Patricia Hill Collins put it, the re-articulation of everyday taken for granted knowledge, how dialogue leads to individual and group empowerment. As Lorde wrote to Parker, whatever I know that is useful to you is yours. And Parker to Lorde, this is not a piece of paper, but my arm extending across all the damn miles between us to hold you. It's Parker's health activism that I want to share about because some of you may not know as much about it. I put together this narrative mostly through dialogues, and I want to thank Jose Alfresco, Blackberry, Lindsay Comey, Judy Grahn, Alicia Jones, and Lisa Moore for having conversations with me. Parker centered group knowledge production and community empowerment through her work in the feminist self-help movement. By self-help, I don't mean the neoliberal ideology that promises self-actualization through individual consumer choices. Rather, I mean the radical DIY movement that grew out of civil rights, Black power, and women's liberation. Among other things, feminist self-helpers taught lay people gynecology and holistic abortion care and were early advocates for reproductive justice. Along with Billie Avery, Dazon Dixon Diallo, Lorde, Loretta Ross, Beverly Smith, Evelyn White, and others, Parker helped catalyze a Black women's health movement in tandem with gynecological self-help. In Avery's words, Black feminist self-help forwarded, quote, talking as an ongoing process, and imagined women's health as encompassing not only reproductive, but cancer, HIV/AIDS, addiction, and mental health care. Parker joined the lay people-run Oakland Feminist Women's Health Center in 1977 and quickly became a director. She worked with a multiracial group of mostly working-class people serving a diverse and underserved population until 1987. Parker insisted on a gender-inclusive space where no one anti-oppression struggle was put before another. Lisa Moore, a clinic worker in the early 80s, recalls, in other spaces, it was maybe feminist but super white, or a POC space but not feminist or queer. At the health center, the liberation of working class people was important. The liberation of people of color was important. I'm going to give that to Pat. It was never a question of having to choose. Parker was an active health educator and defender in her community. At the first Black lesbian conference in 1980, held at the Women's Building, she led a workshop on health issues and Black lesbians with a focus on the injustice of institutionalized experimentation, as she phrased it. In the mid-80s, when the New Right and Operation Rescue waged a terroristic anti-abortion campaign against abortion clinics, health workers, and people seeking abortion care, Parker helped form a clinic defense committee. And I think Steve's going to share a poster for a 1985 rally organized by the Clinic Defense Committee. Parker called for an end to forced sterilizations and spoke publicly about why legal abortion access and reproductive freedom are critical to the survival of poor women and women of color. In 1989, a month before the Supreme Court's ruling on Webster versus Reproductive Health Services, Parker told the Bay Guardian, quote, I tend to come from a little more radical perspective than many of the people in the pro-choice movement. I say a woman can have an abortion on demand, and if she wants to use abortion as birth control, that's her right too. She articulated how the anti-abortion movement was the theocratic right's attempt to, in her words, get women out of the workplace, back in the kitchens, and back in the nuclear family, subservient to men in a patriarchal society. 3 years prior, in February 1986, Parker read with Lorde at the Women's Building. The first poem Parker read that night was Maybe I Should Have Been a Teacher, which we heard earlier. She prefaced it by saying that there were a couple of references that she should, quote, clear up. Parker explained, "There's an area of the poem where I talk about a woman being pregnant in her stomach. And after reading this poem several times, I found out that many of us still believe that women get pregnant in their stomachs from the days when our mothers said, 'There's a baby in my tummy.' We don't get pregnant in our stomachs if we can help it." The audience laughed, and then Parker added, "In all seriousness, that's why we have uteri." In fact, she was referring to an actual case of abdominal pregnancy that she saw at the health center. In this case, the embryo or fetus grows outside of the uterus and attaches to a fallopian tube, bowel, or other organ. While in lyricist mode, Parker continued to wear her health educator hat. The inverse was also often true. In the final stanza of her poem titled Love Isn't, first drafted in 1982, it appears in Jonestown, Parker writes, "All I can give is my love. I care for you. I care for our world. If I stop caring about one, it would only be a matter of time before I stop loving the other." A loving commitment to community and liberation struggles, Parker suggests, is sustained through queer intimacy and a resistant relationship to the closed heterocentric family unit. And queer intimacy is nurtured by one's commitment to community and liberation. In this sense, revolution is not an event on the distant or even not so distant horizon, but rather engaged everyday praxis. Love, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. So that concludes the reading part of tonight's program. And I think now all of us will engage in a conversation for the next 20 minutes. And then after that, we can open it up to the audience. And you can definitely do that either through the hand raising function or in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And again, I would like to invite everyone and encourage you all to make a donation to the Women's Building. There should be a link in the chat. Thank you, Carlos. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to open this pit up just with a question for Leila. It was, yeah. It was by your invitation that everyone write a letter, and everyone took it in such, I guess it can be like an open question to everyone, but I'm really curious to hear how you came about writing yours in particular. I personally had a very strong emotional response to it. I was holding back tears listening to you read. And unlike everyone else, you actually took it in a very straightforward way, writing to Pat and Audre, whereas everyone else kind of circumnavigated that. So I'm just curious to hear about your path to that.
I mean, I think the most obvious answer is that I was inspired by their relationship and the epistolary exchange that unfolded between them. And when I was talking to Steve and Jordan from Caddis about the event, I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all somehow enter this space and imagine a relationship with these two women? And I think how better to do that than through letters. It may be kind of a romantic envisioning of this evening, but that's how I wanted to approach it. And that's kind of how I wanted to get to know everyone here through their relationships with Audre Lorde and Pat Parker. So a bit of a selfish request and envisioning of the night.
But also very intimate too.
Very intimate, yeah.
I mean,
how else can we learn and get to know each other without forcing each other in intimate spaces? I welcome the space of discomfort for growth.
Yeah, I know Judy in particular had a hard time with that intimacy. That, do you want to talk about that a little bit, Judy? Judy's still here.
Well, I think it was, I mean, I have written about them quite a bit, about their work and about, to some extent, our relationships, and about actually their spirits. And I just, as I said at the beginning, I would need 45 minutes to explain the complexity of some of that. So, and to try to then do it again as a kind of assignment was just, it was just beyond my emotional capacity now. I really admire what Leila did to get right in there, you know, because that's where you are. And there are times that I've been in that place and done my writing. But I knew and loved them so much, and I was devastated by their loss. I was so devastated for years I couldn't even talk about it. And then I just started writing more because I had written in the 80s some things. And, you know, it's a place that I could, when I go to it, I go into such a turmoil that it's difficult to come back out of it. And I just am not right now in a place to be that apart, coming apart and coming back together again. So I'm satisfied with what I did, and I hope that the parts of it that convey anything that people don't know are useful, Leila, for your assignment. And I'm sorry that I couldn't go the place where I think you wanted us all to go. So I apologize, but I just simply wasn't in a place to do that right this minute, right this period of time, which of course seems like a minute to me now that I'm 400 years old.
No apology needed. Absolutely no apology needed. It was an honor to hear you just talk about your relationship to Pat and Audre. Really incredible. So don't feel bad for that at all. You shared a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful idea, wonderful way to do a tribute, you know, to these two incredible people. It was such a privilege of my life to know them as well as I did, and for as long as I did. And Avotcja, oh my goodness. Avotcha's reading of Jonestown is just like, to me, she does it second only to Pat. And I've heard her do it, you know, several times, and each time I love it. Each time, Avotcja, you do it differently. I don't know if you're still here. I can't see you.
Definitely here.
Yeah.
There, yes. So talk about being honored. I feel just so blessed, and with the way you do it, and that you did it, you know, tonight in this program, because nobody else could do it the way you do it.
Thank you so much. Can I say something right now?
Yeah.
The reason I did not do the letter is because I was still the music fanatic and what have you. And the Dynamic Faye Carroll commissioned me to write a thing. She's doing a big show. It's coming up on the 15th on Black artists in jazz and blues. And she commissioned me to write a piece. It took me 3 months, and I just finished it a day or two ago.
Okay.
Great. when I'm writing something like that, especially, I don't write anything else. That's it.
Yeah.
But I hope that doing Pat's work also answered that, whatever that call is, because I think that folks need to know her work. She was such a brilliant writer and so diverse and so dedicated. I think that she literally worked herself to death. I don't think that it was just the cancer that got her. I think she was nonstop.
I know. Yeah.
She literally worked herself to death. And but I thought it was important to hear what she had to say and how she said it. She didn't bite her tongue on anything, and I wish that I and a whole bunch of other writers could have written about it. I couldn't even talk when that thing happened.
Mm.
When Jonestown happened, or a lot of the other things that she wrote about on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was important to do that, but I couldn't write the letter because I was busy working on something else, which I'm very proud of, because it will blow some minds. Some of the artists that you've been listening to their music all along and giving other people credit for, it will blow your mind. But anyway, thank you so much for having me here. I'm honored to be. Everybody was wonderful, and what can I say? To be with Judy, who I have love for mad, and Jewel, you with that white hair. Oh my God!
I think the last time I saw you, it was yellow.
We're all getting there.
I wanted to say something about the Leila's idea about letters, and because I think choosing to work in a particular form is usually for me a good challenge. But I got stuck on the letter thing, and I think I said this to you, Judy. You know, before I started writing my vampire novel, I must have read Dracula about 15 times, and it's an epistolary novel. So I got so involved in the idea of letters and how they communicate things, and I just got hung up on the form and how the story and the drama could come through that form. And then I was thinking, I can't write them a letter. They already know everything I'm thinking. So that's when it occurred to me, I did have things I wanted to say to people who are going to study them and read them in the future, who, long after any of us who knew them are around. And I do feel the joy that they both had, the urgency, the excitement, the sensuality, and the humor that they both had was such a huge part of who they were. And people hardly ever talk about that.
Uh-huh.
And I do like people to understand you can be a revolutionary and have a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
So, but thank you for the idea, because it really did make me work to think my way through to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jewel, I loved the way that you did that you spoke to people who, like you said, wanted a bronze statue of Audre. And that was just so amazing, especially the grim and doctrinaire and colorlessness of the second wave. Yes. And how you really wanted to speak to their humor and sensuality. And then when we read these letters, we really do become acquainted with that in the both of them, and that really intimate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just really it was really amazing to just read that, and just about your experience working with Pat and reading Movement in Black with her as a back and
the
and
backup
just
singer.
Yes, and talking
terrified.
yeah, and thinking that she was going to come in here and be like this really strict person, and yeah, and it was just, and also just it reminded me of her essay on poetry and music, and reading poetry at the Women's Music Festival, and how she would walk through there and people would always be surprised to see her, as if poetry and music couldn't mix, and as if humor and sensuality and being a revolutionary couldn't mix. So,
right.
Yeah, feel like you and Avotcja really both brought that to the table. So thank you.
You know, one thing, a couple of people have kindly asked about the poem that I wrote. What is a poet that about for Pat? I've got a new book coming out. It's called Oaktown Mosaic and subtitled Pura Candela or Pure Fire. And it should be out in the next couple of months when it's in that book. It's also in one of the books, California Poets in the Schools, but it will definitely be out there. And thank you for asking. I'm just so honored to be here today.
Great.
I'd like to just speak a little, just briefly about Angela and Arisa, you know, bringing up healing. And the importance, I mean, art is a very important part of healing, but it can only take us just so far. And after that, we need other kinds of support. And I don't think Pat ever found that really. So those years that she became a healer, she was just pouring out and pouring out. And I don't know what was coming back that could, because she couldn't really do her art. So she couldn't really express this, you know, bottomless pit of feeling that she was walking around with all the time. And Audre was trying to warn her of that, you know, watch out for your liver, you know, because anger can go to your liver or it can wreck your heart, and you need to be careful about that. And I'm appreciative of your generation being able to describe ways of healing, of having an interest in it as a part of your revolutionary progressiveness, we can call it that. That's a part of it, is to find the different ways that work to heal wounded communities. Really, I mean, communities are wounded and being wounded, and so that needs to be a part of what happens going forward. I feel really strongly about that, and so I'm just appreciative of what you younger folks are taking on.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say as well, a dear friend of mine and Pat's, his name is Akinyele Sadik. He's probably one of the people who's one of the participants today. He wrote an opera for Pat Parker. And
Oh wow!
a couple of times we did it a couple of times at the tributes we do for Pat every year, and it's on a CD. He's part of a group called the Troublemakers Union, and they have a CD out, the Troublemakers Union, and you need to get that CD because that opera is on there. It's just an absolutely brilliant piece of music, poetic music, and Akinyele, if you're out there, thank you so much. Pat has a lot of influence on a lot of folks. As I say, we were good for each other because we pulled each other into different audiences. And I am so grateful for her presence in my life, and that you are helping to keep her legacy alive. So thank you.
Avotcja, would you say the name of the composer again, and the name of the opera?
His name is Akinyele Sadik, and the name of the group he's part of is called the Troublemakers Union. And as far as I know, they only have that one CD. And if you get that CD, that opera is on the CD. It's a beautiful piece of music, and knowing him, he's probably still adding more and more and more and more to it. But at this point, it's one of the things on that CD, and it's really an amazing piece of work. He's a beautiful brother who does good work.
Oh, it sounds like it. And you know, my old ears cannot absorb his name unless you just say it really slowly.
Akinyele Sadik. I'll write it in the chat here.
Akinyele
Sadik.
Yeah, write it in the chat. That's great.
That would be good.
Thank you, Avotcja. So it's almost 8:30, and I wanted to invite the audience to ask any questions that they might have. Once again, you could either do that by the raising your hand function in the participants thing. I don't think I'm being very clear in my instructions around that, but and also the Q&A function. And technically, I think we're supposed to end at 8:30, but if you would like to stay, if the panelists feel comfortable enough to do so, like we can keep on doing it. So.
Thank you, Judy, for just sort of mentioning the healing component, because when Leila suggested the letters, I mean, after reading the sister letters, I was just so moved by what felt like medicine between the two women, and the medicine of their like humanity, their playfulness, their tenderness, and also too just recognizing that the same shit was going on, you know, like the same concerns, the same sense of self-doubt, and that just, you know, just felt like the present moment for me. It felt like conversations had with friends, with my mother, with my grandmother, and it just felt like this generational continuance, and sort of trying to figure out how can that be interrupted, how can we intervene on that. And so for me, the letter became a kind of prescription. Like, how can the letter be direction for how to figure out how to get well, to sort of put your body in a different kind of action that moves you out of your same story. And so what was great, I mean, it's, you know, kind of reading the letters, it's like when I'm reading the poems of Pat Parker and Audre Lorde, I actually just start writing poems. I start doing the work of a poet. It's like it's like all of a sudden I get like plugged into this like deep lineage of creativity, and now I have to do the work. And it's such pleasure to sort of figure out how to work with the different voices or with the different sets of feelings that are coming up. And you know, with the pandemic and the election season, and you know, the whole activation of this sort of brand of anti-Blackness for this particular election, it just felt like there needed to be more prescriptions for how to be well, how to step out of our own kinds of dark spaces, and begin to find our own way to create light. So yeah, so for me, it was this really great creative moment in the midst of all of this. Is I was just activated back into that fun creativity of like, yeah, let's just imagine some things. Let's play with my own sort of distance from my Caribbean background. How can I use that voice? Yeah, and so I think what was great about doing this was being able to enter into that creative energy that is healing, because it creates those moments of shift and possibility.
So there's two questions. One is for Judy, and it's would Judy please tell us a little more about the time when Audre went to Mexico?
Oh, she wrote about it herself, and to know about it, you need to write, you need to read Zami. It's, you know, it's her, what did she call it? A biomythology. And she has a whole section in there about going to Mexico. I think that's where it is. She has sections about working in a factory. She has, you know, it really does have a lot of her life, and then ends up with her making love to a goddess who lives in, it sounds like maybe the Lower East Side. I'm not sure where Aphrodite's apartment was, but it was a magical and mystical place that was full of plants from floor to ceiling. and is where they just simply could engage in just pure sensual love, a kind of a melting place. It's really a brilliant book. So that's where to read about it, though. But she had a lover down there. She had quite a relationship with Mexico. Does that answer your question? Did I unmute?
Yeah.
I
Oh.
think the question's answered. Sure.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
I don't know if you see me, but I see all of you.
We don't see you, but we hear you.
Marty.
Okay, it's
Okay.
Marty.
Hey, Marty.
Hey,
Welcome.
Hi, Marty.
hi, beautiful women.
Hi.
How are you all? Yeah, I gotta say, I feel like a jellyfish to be here. I'm shaking. I moved in the kitchen because my internet connection is unstable, like the rest of the world. But I did want to say three quick things. First of all, thank you all for doing this, and Avotcja, you know how much I love you. Avotcja has honored Pat. Ow, cramp in the leg. Ouch. Almost every day. I mean, every year she did a benefit for our daughter Anastasia, and to keep Pat's memory alive. And they were very powerful, spiritual. And you know, Judy, you were there sometimes. Various people were there, but this is kind of feels like keeping that tradition alive. And I love each and every one of you for it. And it gives me hope to hear all of this. That's the first thing. The second thing, hearing I was there at the Women's Building. Audre spent the night at our house, this very house in which I still reside. And after the reading, we all went to dinner together. And, you know, we were East Bay, Oaktown folks, even though we moved outside of Oakland after, that's a whole other story. But anyway, we went to some restaurant in San Francisco. We didn't really know. Somebody said, oh, let's go to this restaurant, but it was outside and they had heat lamps. But, you know, neither one of them was, well, let's see, Pat maybe wasn't well, but didn't know it yet, but Audre was not well. So she became very chilled. And but, you know, we had a great time laughing and talking. We came home. There was the room where she stayed in the house had this old wall heater that I don't think I had fired up in, you know, since we moved in here. And but I lit it and turned it all the way up. And she's like, oh, this feels great. It was probably, you know, so we were all exhausted and probably had a few drinks. And so we all passed out. And in the morning, Audre came in. I was still in bed. Pat had gotten up early. And later that day, Adrian Rich came up from Santa Cruz to hang. And I have a picture of the three of them in the driveway here. Anyway, but Audre came in and Pat had let me sleep in. And I don't know where Anastasia was. She was 86, so she was 3.5, our daughter. But she came into the room, woke me up out of bed, you know, grabbed my hand, and she said, come with me. And she was just laughing. And so she dragged me through the house to the room, which was like really a renovated garage where she was staying. And it was probably 105 degrees in there because, you know, the heater was either off or on. She said, oh, it was great, but I'm really toasty now. You know, you want to turn it off? And, you know, and then we just had a beautiful breakfast. And it was a wonderful time. But, you know, it was that day, it was after that reading at the Women's Center. And, you know, in years before, I had done broken bricks and karate demonstrations there myself. And the fact that the Women's Building is continuing to be a resource and a powerful meeting place for women is just incredibly wonderful. But to speak to, you know, Judy's point and everyone's point about healing, I boldly wrote something that Nancy Bariano put in one of the reprints of Movement in Black, and I just said, call this epilogue. And so I want to read it to you. Here it goes. I had the privilege of waking up next to Pat Parker every day for the last 9 years of her life. As her sister Ethel said, we were more married than most married folks. We were blessed with the acceptance and love of both of our families. Pat had a fierce loyalty to her children, as well as to her immediate and extended families. I miss her still. In the face of death, Pat demonstrated profound courage and good humor, as well as righteous anger. She cried more when her dog Andy died than she ever cried during her own painful illness. She left her pillow-like prosthesis on the dashboard of my truck at Stanford University on her way to a reading with Audre Lorde, after I assured her that if it didn't make her feel more comfortable, she needn't wear it to make other people feel more comfortable. She never wore it again. Commenting wryly on cancer, she once told me that, quote, "The only good thing about cancer is that you do chemo, you get skinny, and you die. I just realized I'm going to die fat, and I'm really pissed." Unquote. Pat was able to inspire countless individuals to rise up, shake off their chains, and let their true beauty shine. Yet her own inner demons often kept her in a stranglehold and contributed to her untimely death. No matter how much those around her loved her, no matter how much she was admired by those who never even met her, she was often tormented inside, weighted down by the internalization of centuries of pain. Read this book and look in the mirror. If you cannot love who you see, think of Pat. Radiate love back to yourself, for you, for her, and for everyone who needs to gently accept and free themselves. That's it. So it kind of speaks to what you were saying.
It
And
certainly does, Marty. It's just magnificent. Thank you so much for writing that. So important.
Thank you, sweetie. And thanks for all your trips out here to go to the pool with her and all the other things that you did and toward the end there. It was priceless. So
It was my privilege.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself now before I get too more jellyfish-like.
Thank you, Marty. That was really lovely. Thank you.
Marty, te doy un gran beso. You know what I have to say? When she talks about Pat's demons, Pat may have had demons, but she was the ultimate friend. She was so unbelievably supportive and almost over supportive of my sobriety. Despite her own demons, she would not let anybody have anything that looked like it was intoxicating anywhere around me. And for that, I will truly be grateful, because when I was out there acting a fool and using and drinking way back during the Civil War, you know, I could have done that. And so that's the ultimate declaration of friendship. And for that, I am truly grateful. She was not only a wonderful parent and a great lover, she was an amazing friend and a poet that should never be forgotten. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So right.
So much, Marty, for sharing. And thank you to all of our panelists and to our audience for joining us. And I'm kind of overwhelmed and deeply moved by tonight. And I would like to encourage all of you to make a donation to the Women's Building. And if you have seen the link in the chat to the publication that Caddis is willing to mail you out for free, please do. And everyone, when you leave tonight's event, a questionnaire will pop up, and please fill it out. And I would also love to encourage you all and invite you all to next Thursday's Poetry Center event, featuring someone very near and dear to my heart, Wendy Trevino, who is the current Maza writer in residence. Really tremendous, powerful, exquisite writer and dear friend and comrade. So yeah, and she'll be in conversation with Zaina Al-Sus. So yeah, and with that, thank you everyone so much for being here this evening, for all of your words, for your stories, for wisdom. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for managing us through the evening. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I
Thank you,
tried.
Tatiana.
It was very lovely. All right, I look forward to seeing all of you again, perhaps in person next time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for thinking this up.
Yes, thanks, Steve. Now we have to go and count votes.
Yeah, and thank you, Molly, and thank you, Carlos, for managing chat, and Molly for being our person behind the scenes. So
thank you all.
Thank you.
Love you all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Be well, everyone.
Question. I'm trying to sign in to get this publication, but it's not only asking for an email, it's asking for my password. Why should I give them my password?